The thunder crashed, and the sound ripped through the sky like canvas tearing. Nora Hayes didn't even flinch. She was too busy crawling through the impossibly small window of the smokehouse, her skirts snagging on the rough, splintered wood. The smell of cured meat, thick and greasy, filled her lungs as she tumbled onto the dirt floor. She scrambled into the darkness, frantically searching, desperate for a place to hide. Her uncle's voice, a raw, furious bellow, echoed across the property. He was getting closer. A thin line of blood, warm and sticky, trickled down her cheek where his ring had sliced her open. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, pounding so hard she thought it might just burst. She never meant to find the ledger. She never meant to uncover the dark secret he'd been hiding for all these years. But she had. And now, in the unforgiving Colorado territory of 1878, there was nowhere left to run. The smokehouse door creaked. It was a slow, agonizing sound that sent a blinding shaft of late afternoon sun across the floor. Nora squeezed her eyes shut, pressing herself against the back wall, disappearing behind a row of hanging venison. She held her breath until her lungs burned. A tall figure stepped inside, a perfect silhouette against the light. But it wasn't her uncle. This man wore a cowboy hat, and he moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that was utterly alien. He didn't shout. He didn't stomp. He just stood there, his eyes scanning the shadows. And then his gaze locked onto her hiding place. He knew. "Madam," he said, his voice so soft it was almost a whisper, low and steady. "Your uncle's in the main house now. He won't find you here, but you need to stay quiet." Nora's fingers dug into the wooden beam beside her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. Who was this man? Was he one of her uncle's men? A trap. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Elijah Blackwood," he said, and he didn't move closer, as if he could feel the terror radiating from her. "I work the neighboring ranch. I was riding by when I heard the commotion." Outside, her uncle's rage boiled over again. "Nora! You ungrateful wretch! Show yourself!" Elijah moved then, deeper into the smokehouse, deliberately placing his body between Nora and the door. A human shield. "He seems mighty intent on finding you." "He'll kill me if he does," Nora choked out, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The stranger's expression hardened, his jaw tightening into a line of granite. "Not while I'm around," he said, and for some reason Nora couldn't explain. She believed him. Maybe it was the calm certainty in his piercing blue eyes, or the way he stood solid as an ancient oak tree in the face of the storm. He was a rock in the middle of her hurricane. "Vernon!" Another man's voice called from the distance, sharp and urgent. "Sheriff's on his way! Says there's been trouble up at the Miller place!" Nora heard her uncle let out a string of curses, followed by the frantic thunder of hoofbeats as he rode away. He was gone. Only then did she let herself breathe, a ragged, shuddering gasp that shook her whole body. "He's gone for now," Elijah said, though he didn't relax his stance one bit. "But he'll be back. Do you have somewhere safe to go, Miss Hayes?" She stepped out from behind the hanging meat, wincing as a sharp pain shot through her bruised ribs. "No," she admitted. "I don't. My Uncle Vernon is my only living relative. I've been with him since my father died 3 months ago." Elijah's gaze fell to the ugly, swelling bruise on her cheek, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Has he done this before?" Nora looked away, shame and fear making her feel small. "It's gotten worse. It all got worse after I found his ledger." She explained everything in a frantic rush, the words tumbling out. How her uncle had been stealing from her father's mine for years. How she inherited everything when her father died, but Vernon was the executor, the man in control until she turned 21. "He doesn't want to give up control," Elijah finished for her, his voice grim. "He wants me to sign it all over to him. she whispered. When I refused, she gestured to her face. That was all the explanation he needed. Elijah removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled at his temples. He ran a hand through it, his mind clearly working. Miss Hayes, I can't in good conscience leave you here. I have a sister, Emma. She runs a boarding house in a town called Cedar Ridge, about 20 miles west. She'd take you in. No questions asked. The idea of escape was a terrifying, beautiful thing. I can't just leave, she protested, even though her heart was screaming at her to go. Everything my father built is here. And what good will any of it do you if you're not alive to claim it? Elijah countered, his logic sharp and undeniable. We need to get you somewhere safe. Then we can figure out how to protect what's rightfully yours. A dog barked in the distance, and Nora flinched violently. He could come back at any moment. He'll be hunting for me. Then we best not waste any more time, Elijah said, settling his hat back on his head. He offered her his hand. My horse is tied up behind the orchard. Can you ride? A spark of her old self, the person she was before her father died, flickered to life. Since I was 6, she replied, and for the first time in months she felt a glimmer of something she thought was gone forever. Hope. Then let's go, Miss Hayes. Dawn's a few hours away, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. She hesitated for only a second before placing her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses from hard work, but his grip was gentle as it closed around her fingers. The contrast sent a strange shiver through her. Why are you helping me, Mr. Blackwood? You don't even know me. In the dim, dusty light of the smokehouse, his eyes met hers. They were startlingly blue. My ma always taught me that a man's character is judged by what he does when no one else is looking, he said simply. I'm not in the habit of leaving folks in danger. He paused, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. And it's just Elijah, if you don't mind. Elijah, she repeated, the name feeling solid and real on her tongue. It felt like a promise. Together, they slipped out of the smokehouse and into the gathering dusk. The world was painted in shades of purple and gray. They moved like ghosts through the orchard, where a dappled gray horse waited patiently, its breath misting in the cooling air. Elijah helped her mount, his hand strong at her waist, then swung up behind her with an easy, practiced motion. His arms formed a protective circle as he reached for the reins. She was surrounded by him, his chest solid against her back. Hold tight, he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. As they rode away from the only home she'd known for 3 long months, the house that had become her prison, Nora looked back just once. Then she faced forward, leaning into the man behind her, riding headlong into an uncertain future. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have guessed, was that Elijah Blackwood wasn't just a random cowboy who happened to be riding by. His arrival in that smokehouse was no accident. He had been looking for a Hayes. He just hadn't expected to find one like her. The night air was a cool balm on Nora's flushed cheeks. The steady, rhythmic sound of the horse's hoofbeats was a strange kind of comfort, a drumbeat pulling her further and further away from her nightmare. Above them, the sky exploded with stars, countless pinpricks of impossible light in the vast, dark ocean of the Colorado sky. They'd been riding for nearly an hour, sticking to winding, less traveled paths that Elijah seemed to know like the back of his hand. Finally, he broke the silence. There's a creek up ahead, he said, his voice a low rumble against her back. We can rest the horse for a spell. How are you holding up? Her body ached with a deep, throbbing pain, a map of her uncle's cruelty. But she refused to complain. She wouldn't be weak. I'm fine, she answered, though her voice was thin and shaky, betraying her exhaustion. Elijah didn't press. He just guided the horse toward a small clearing nestled by the whispering creek. You're tougher than you look, Miss Hayes. A small, sad smile touched her lips. My father always said I had my mother's spirit, she replied, the memory of her father a fresh stab of grief. She crossed the plains in a covered wagon when she was just 16. Elijah dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands were steady and sure at her waist, and for a heart-stopping moment they stood so close she could see the dark stubble on his jaw, could smell the scent of leather and pine and clean night air that clung to him. It was an intensely masculine scent, and it made her feel dizzy. Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman, he said, his voice soft, before he stepped back, breaking the spell. Wait here. I'll water the horse. While Elijah tended to his mount, Nora sank onto a fallen log, the full weight of the day crashing down on her. What was going to happen now? The mine, the silver spur, was her entire inheritance. It was all she had left of her father. Without it, she was destitute, a woman alone in a hard country, forced to rely on the charity of strangers. A terrifying thought. You look 1,000 miles away, Elijah said, returning with a canteen. He offered it to her. Drink. It's a long ride yet to Cedar Ridge. Nora accepted the water, her throat raw and dry. I was just thinking about my father's mine. It's all I have left of him. The silver spur, right? Elijah sat beside her but kept a respectful distance. His question was casual, but his eyes were sharp, watchful. I've heard it's one of the most promising claims in the territory. You've heard of it? Most folks around these parts have, he said, his gaze fixed on the creek where the moonlight was dancing on the water's surface. Your father struck a rich vein last year, didn't he? Nora nodded, a lump forming in her throat. The assayer said it could produce for decades, with proper management. She twisted her hands in her lap, the fabric of her skirt bunching under her nervous fingers. That's why Uncle Vernon wants it so badly. It's not just about the money he can steal now. It's about the fortune it will become. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. We'll figure something out, he said at last. My sister Emma, she knows just about everyone in Cedar Ridge. That includes the county judge. If your father's will is as clear as you say, your uncle can't legally take what's yours. He has connections, Nora said, her voice small and frail. People who owe him favors. People who fear him. That's why he was so confident. He told me no one would ever be able to stop him. A grim smile touched Elijah's lips. He hasn't met the Blackwoods yet, he replied. Emma's got a spine of steel and a mind like a fox, and I'm not exactly without friends myself. His confidence was a lifeline, but Nora had learned the hard way that good intentions weren't always enough. The world was a cruel place. Still, what other choice did she have? She had to trust him. Thank you, she said, the words feeling inadequate. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along. Elijah studied her face in the pale moonlight, his expression unreadable. You'd have found a way, Miss Hayes. I can tell you're not the type to give up easily. He stood then, offering his hand again. We should keep moving. Your uncle will have noticed you're gone by now, and he'll have realized the sheriff isn't really coming. The blood drained from Nora's face. What? The man who called out about the sheriff? Elijah said calmly. That was a friend of mine. It was a diversion, to give you time to get away. The first twist. This wasn't a random rescue. It was planned. Her mind reeled. This quiet, steady cowboy had friends who helped him orchestrate rescues in the middle of nowhere? Who was he? He saw the confusion and fear in her eyes. There's a lot to explain, he said. But not here. Not now. We need to ride. He helped her back onto the horse, his touch as gentle as ever, but now it felt different, charged, complicated. He mounted behind her, his arms once again a protective circle. But now she wondered what he was protecting her from. Just her uncle, or something more? As they rode on through the night, the landscape shifting into dark, imposing foothills, Nora's mind was a whirlwind of questions. Elijah's quiet conversation about landmarks now seemed like a distraction. Who was Elijah Blackwood, really? And why was he so invested in saving Nora Hayes? As the first faint hint of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of gray and rose, they crested a ridge. Elijah reined in the horse. Below them, nestled in a valley, lay the town of Cedar Ridge. It looked peaceful, idyllic. But Nora knew better now. Nothing was as it seemed. She had escaped her uncle's prison, only to find herself caught in a mystery she didn't understand. And the man who held all the answers was sitting right behind her. The sun was just peeking over the jagged peaks of the mountains when they rode down Cedar Ridge's main street. The town was slowly stirring to life. A shopkeeper was sweeping his storefront, the rhythmic swish-swish of the broom a lonely sound in the quiet morning. The blacksmith was already at his forge, the sharp metallic clang of his hammer echoing through the crisp air. Elijah guided the horse toward a two-story clapboard building with a neatly painted sign that read, Blackwood Boarding House. A wide porch wrapped around the front, with inviting rocking chairs already waiting for the day's occupants. Window boxes overflowed with colorful wildflowers, a cheerful splash of life against the simple wooden structure. "This is Emma's place," Elijah explained as he helped Nora dismount. Her legs, stiff and sore from the long ride, nearly buckled. He steadied her with a firm hand at her elbow, his touch sending a jolt through her. She inherited it from our aunt 5 years ago. Made quite a success of it. Before they could even take a step toward the porch, the front door swung open and a woman emerged. She was tall and slender, built like Elijah, with the same dark hair, though hers was pinned up in a neat, severe knot at the nape of her neck. Her blue eyes, the exact same shade as her brother's, widened at the sight of them. "Elijah, I wasn't expecting you for another week." Her gaze shifted to Nora, taking in the tangled hair, the torn dress, the ugly purpling bruise on her cheek. Her expression instantly softened from surprise to a deep maternal concern. "But I see you've brought company." "Emma, this is Miss Nora Hayes," Elijah said, his voice low. "She's in need of a safe place to stay. Nora, my sister, Emma Blackwood." Emma descended the steps, her movements graceful and purposeful. She approached Nora not with pity, but with a warm, genuine smile. "Any friend of my brother's is welcome here, Miss Hayes." She glanced at Elijah, and a silent conversation seemed to pass between them in a single look. A look that told Nora this wasn't the first time Elijah had brought home a person in trouble. "You both look like you've been through a war," Emma said. "Come inside. I'll fix you some breakfast while you tell me what's happened." The inside of the boarding house was as clean and inviting as the outside. The front parlor was filled with comfortable, well-worn chairs and a sofa, all centered around a large stone fireplace. Emma led them through to a spacious kitchen at the back of the house, where the delicious smell of baking bread hung in the air. "Sit," she instructed, gesturing to a large pine table that could easily seat 10. "I'll put on some coffee." Nora sank gratefully into a chair, her body finally giving in to the bone-deep fatigue and the throbbing pain she'd been fighting for hours. Elijah sat across from her, placing his hat on the table. His eyes, full of a concern that seemed to go deeper than mere sympathy, never left her face. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice tight. "Miss Hayes needs medical attention. Her uncle attacked her yesterday." Emma, who had been moving around the stove with brisk efficiency, stilled. She turned, her expression a thunderous mixture of fury and compassion. "Dr. Lewis lives just down the street. I'll send for him after you've had something to eat." As Emma bustled around the kitchen, setting out plates and frying bacon, Elijah began to explain the situation. He kept it brief, sticking to the facts. Nora was too tired to add much, just nodding occasionally to confirm a detail. By the time Emma set heaping plates of eggs, bacon, and thick slices of freshly baked bread in front of them, she knew the core of the story. "Vernon Hayes," Emma said thoughtfully as she joined them at the table, her brow furrowed. "I've heard that name. Heard rumors about him. None of them good." "He's dangerous," Nora said, her voice barely a whisper. She picked at her food, her stomach a tight knot of anxiety despite her hunger. "And he's determined to get control of my father's mine." "The Silver Spur," Emma nodded, her gaze sharp. "It's becoming quite famous in these parts, but if your father left it to you in his will, your uncle has no legal claim." "The will is clear," Nora confirmed. "But Uncle Vernon was named executor until I turn 21 next spring. He's been using that position to siphon money from the mine's profits for years, when I confronted him with the proof I found in his ledgers." She touched her bruised cheek again. "He said no one would believe me over him." Emma's eyes flashed with righteous indignation. "We'll see about that. Judge Hollister is a fair man. He has no patience for bullies who abuse their positions of trust." "I need to send a telegram," Elijah added, looking at his sister. "To Robert Patterson at the Double B. He'll keep an eye on things at the mine while we sort this out." Nora looked from the brother to the sister, overwhelmed by their immediate, unquestioning willingness to help her, to fight for her. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked, the question that had been haunting her all night. "You barely know me." Emma reached across the table and patted Nora's hand, her touch surprisingly gentle. "That's how we do things in Cedar Ridge, dear. We look after each other. And we look after those who need looking after," Elijah added softly. There was something in his gaze, an intensity, that made Nora's tired heart give a strange little flutter. She quickly looked down at her plate, a blush creeping up her neck. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's no debt between friends," Emma assured her with a warm smile. "Now eat your breakfast. Then I'll show you to a room where you can rest while I fetch the doctor." By the time Nora had forced down some food and climbed the stairs to the room Emma had prepared, she was swaying on her feet. The room was small but charming, with a brass bed covered in a colorful quilt and sunlight filtering gently through lace curtains. "The bathroom is at the end of the hall," Emma explained, turning down the bed. "I've left a nightgown and some things for you. We look to be about the same size, so you're welcome to borrow whatever you need." When Emma left, Nora stripped off her filthy torn dress and washed away the dirt and blood of her ordeal. The simple act of being clean felt like reclaiming a small piece of herself. She slipped on the borrowed nightgown and climbed into the soft bed, her body groaning in protest. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her uncle's twisted, furious face. Then another image would push it away. Elijah's steady blue eyes in the dim smokehouse. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Miss Hayes?" It was Elijah's voice. "The doctor is here if you're up to seeing him." "Yes, come in," she called, pulling the quilt up to her chin. The door opened to admit Elijah and an older man with kind eyes and a black medical bag. "This is Dr. Lewis," Elijah said. "I'll wait outside." The doctor was thorough and gentle. He cleaned and bandaged her cheek, bound her bruised ribs, and left her with 2 tonics, one for the pain and another to help her sleep. "You're a lucky young woman," he said as he packed his bag. "No serious damage. Rest is what you need most." After he left, Emma returned with a cup of steaming tea. "Dr. Lewis's special blend," she explained. "It'll help you sleep without dreams." Nora took the cup gratefully. "Has Elijah—" "He's gone to send that telegram and speak with Judge Hollister," Emma said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "He wanted me to tell you not to worry, that he'll make sure your uncle doesn't cause any more trouble." A spike of fear went through Nora. "Vernon is a dangerous man. I don't want Elijah getting hurt because of me." Emma smiled, a knowing, reassuring look in her eyes. "My brother can take care of himself. He wasn't always a rancher, you know. This piqued Nora's curiosity. What did he do before? He rode with the Texas Rangers for a time, Emma said, a note of pride in her voice. Only came back to Colorado after our parents died 3 years ago. Said it was time to put down roots. But then she added something that sent a chill down Nora's spine. He came back for another reason, too, to settle an old family score. Something to do with a mine and a man who betrayed our father a long time ago. The tea was already making Nora's eyelids heavy, her mind fuzzy, but through the fog, a terrifying connection was beginning to form. A mine, a family score, a betrayal. Elijah hadn't just been riding by. He hadn't just been looking for a haze. He had been looking for her father or her uncle. As sleep finally pulled her under, Nora's last conscious thought was that she hadn't escaped a monster at all. She had just run straight into the arms of another one. Nora slept like the dead, a deep, dreamless slumber courtesy of the doctor's tonic. When she finally swam back to consciousness, the afternoon sun was streaming through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Her body still ached, a dull, persistent throb, but the crushing exhaustion had finally receded. She lay still for a moment, just listening. The muffled sounds of the boarding house, voices from downstairs, the distant clatter of dishes were strangely comforting. A light knock at her door, and then Emma entered, carrying a tray laden with a bowl of steaming soup, fresh bread, and a pot of tea. "Ah, you're awake. Good," Emma said with a smile. "You must be starving." Nora realized she was, ravenously hungry. "What time is it?" "Nearly 5 o'clock," Emma replied, setting the tray on her lap. "You slept the day away. It's exactly what you needed." Nora took a spoonful of the rich chicken soup. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. "Has there been any word from Elijah?" "He returned about an hour ago," Emma said, pulling open the curtains wider. "He spoke with Judge Hollister. The judge is very interested in your situation. He wants to meet with you as soon as you're feeling stronger." "And my uncle?" Nora asked, her voice trembling slightly. Emma's expression grew serious. "No sign of him in town. But Elijah's friend Robert sent a telegram. Vernon was back at the mine this morning, acting as if nothing happened. Told the foreman you'd gone to visit friends and would be away for some time." The thought of her uncle sitting in her father's office, touching her father's things, made Nora's stomach clench. "He's going to steal everything." "Not so fast," Emma assured her. "Judge Hollister has already sent a deputy out to the mine. He delivered a notice informing your uncle that his authority as executor is being officially reviewed due to allegations of impropriety. He can't make any major financial moves until this is all resolved." A small measure of relief. At least his hands were tied for now. "I need to speak with the judge. As soon as possible. He's coming for dinner tomorrow evening," Emma said. "Elijah thought it would be less intimidating for you to meet him here rather than in a stuffy courtroom." The judge agreed. Nora nodded, finishing her soup. The simple meal was restoring her strength, and with it, her resolve. "I'd like to get up for a while," she said. "I've never been one for staying in bed." Emma laughed. "You remind me of myself. There are some clothes in the wardrobe that should fit you. Come on down when you're ready. It's quiet just now." After Emma left, Nora carefully made her way out of bed. The clothes in the wardrobe were simple but well made. She chose a blue skirt and a plain white blouse. She brushed her tangled auburn hair, twisting it into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. The face that stared back at her from the small mirror was pale and haunted, the bandage on her cheek a stark reminder of her ordeal. But for the first time in days, she saw a flicker of the woman she used to be. The stairs creaked as she made her way down. She found Elijah in the front parlor standing by the fireplace talking to another man. Both turned as she entered. "Miss Hayes," Elijah said, his voice softer than she remembered. "It's good to see you on your feet. How are you feeling? Better, thank you, she replied, her voice steady. But her mind was racing. He came back to settle an old family score. Something to do with a mine. Emma said you spoke with the judge. I did, he said, and this is his clerk, Michael Townsend. The other man, thin and scholarly with spectacles perched on his nose, stepped forward and gave a polite bow. He's brought some papers for you to look over before you meet with the judge tomorrow. They settled in the parlor. Mr. Townsend spread several official-looking documents on the low table between them. We'll need to establish a few facts, Miss Hayes, he explained. The date of your father's death, the terms of his will, and any evidence you have of financial impropriety. Nora leaned forward, ignoring the sharp twinge from her ribs. She told them everything, her voice clear and strong. She recited dates, clauses from the will, details from her father's business. And then she came to the ledgers. I found ledgers showing that Uncle Vernon has been diverting funds for years, even before my father died. And do you have these ledgers? Mr. Townsend asked, pen poised over his notepad. Her heart sank. No, they're still hidden in my father's study, at the house near the mine. Can you describe what you saw in them? For the next hour, Nora detailed everything she could remember. Dates, amounts, discrepancies. And then she remembered something else. A detail she had overlooked in her panic. There was another name, she said slowly, her mind's eye picturing the spidery script in the ledger. A recurring payment, listed only as B debt. Mr. Townsend looked up. B debt? Elijah, who had been silent and watchful, suddenly went very still. A muscle jumped in his jaw. What does that mean? Nora asked, looking between the two men. It probably means nothing, Townsend said quickly, a little too quickly. Just a note. But Elijah's face was a mask of stone. B. Debt. Blackwood debt. It couldn't be a coincidence. The story Emma told her. A mine. A betrayal. Was this it? Was this the proof? Mr. Blackwood? Nora pressed, her voice sharp. Do you know what that means? Elijah finally met her gaze, and the look in his eyes made her blood run cold. It was a look of cold, hard confirmation. It's too dangerous to go back for the ledgers, he said, his voice flat, avoiding her question entirely. Vernon has already shown what he's capable of. But the ledgers would provide irrefutable evidence, Nora insisted, her mind reeling. She had to know. I know exactly where they are, in a false bottom of my father's desk. I could draw you a map. Elijah and Mr. Townsend exchanged a look. I'll discuss it with the judge, the clerk said, gathering his papers. For now, he's issued a temporary order freezing the mine's assets. After Mr. Townsend left, an unnerving silence filled the room. You think we have a chance of stopping him? Nora asked, breaking the tension. More than a chance, Elijah said, but his voice lacked the easy confidence it had held before. He was distracted, haunted. What is B debt, Elijah? She asked again, her voice low and demanding. What aren't you telling me? He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a conflict so deep it seemed to tear him in two. It's complicated, Nora. He used her first name, and the intimacy of it was a shock. My family, and your family, our histories are connected in a way I'm just beginning to understand. The second twist. It wasn't just a simple rescue, it was personal, deeply personal. My father was a miner, he said, his voice barely a whisper. A prospector. He was partners with another man years ago. They struck the mother lode, the vein that would become the silver spur. Nora's breath caught in her throat. His partner, Elijah continued, his eyes burning into hers, was James Hayes, your father. They were partners? Nora was stunned. Her father had never mentioned a partner. He'd always told her he built the mine from scratch, all on his own. What happened? Your father bought my father out, Elijah said, his voice laced with an old, bitter anger. For a fraction of what the claim was worth. He used some legal trickery, a loophole in their contract. My father fought it, but he lost. It ruined him. He died a broken man a few years later. The room seemed to tilt. Her father, the man she idolized, the kind, wise man who had taught her everything. A cheat? A liar? It wasn't possible. I don't believe you, she whispered. The ledgers, Elijah said, his voice relentless. The B debt. It stands for Blackwood debt. Your uncle knew, he must have known. He was paying us back. Conscience money. Stolen from you to pay back the family your father stole from in the first place. The entire world shifted beneath her feet. Her noble father, her villainous uncle, the heroic stranger who saved her. It was all a lie, a tangled, ugly web of lies. And she was caught right in the middle of it. Elijah hadn't saved her out of kindness. He was here for revenge. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She stumbled backward, away from him, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. You were using me, she accused, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and betrayal. You came here for the mine. You saw me, a damsel in distress, and thought I was your key to getting it back. A flicker of pain crossed his face, so quick she almost missed it. No, he said, his voice rough. That's not how it was. I came here looking for answers, yes. I've been investigating Vernon Hayes for months. I heard the commotion at your property and I came to help. What I found, finding you, that changed things. Changed how? She shot back, her heart hardening against him. How does it change the fact that your family wants to destroy mine? This isn't about destruction, Nora. It's about justice, he insisted, taking a step toward her. She flinched away. My father was a good man, she said, the words a desperate prayer. There has to be another explanation. Then help me find it, he said, his voice intense. Help me get those ledgers. They'll have the truth, all of it. The air between them crackled with tension. Trusting him was impossible now. But what other choice did she have? He was right. The ledgers held the key. They held the truth about her uncle, and now, it seemed, the truth about her father as well. Her entire life, her entire inheritance, was built on a foundation that was now crumbling to dust. She was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the only person offering her a hand was the man who had just confessed he had every reason to push her off. Before she could answer, before she could even think, Emma appeared in the doorway. Dinner will be ready soon, she said, her cheerful voice a jarring intrusion. The other boarders are coming in. Nora, you're welcome to join us, or I can bring a tray to your room if you'd prefer. The thought of facing a table full of strangers, of making small talk while her world was imploding, was unbearable. My room, she said, her voice hollow. I think I'd rather eat in my room. Of course, dear, Emma said kindly. Elijah, will you be joining us? He glanced at Nora's pale, stricken face, then back at his sister. Actually, he said, his gaze locked on Nora, I thought I might keep Miss Hayes company. If she doesn't object, we have more to discuss. The offer hung in the air, a challenge and a plea all at once. If she said no, she would be alone with her fears, with the ghost of her father and the monstrous possibility that he was not the man she thought he was. If she said yes, she would be breaking bread with the enemy. Or was he? Her mind was a chaotic storm of doubt and suspicion. But one thing was clear. She couldn't face this alone. I wouldn't mind the company, she said, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. Emma's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but she simply nodded. I'll bring up 2 trays then. When Emma was gone, Nora finally looked at Elijah, truly looked at him. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the anger at a decades-old injustice warring with something else, something softer and more recent that was directed at her. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I'm sure you'd rather eat with the others." "I'd rather be here," he said simply. "We need to talk this through. All of it." Emma soon returned with 2 trays of roast chicken and vegetables. She set them up in the small sitting room adjacent to the parlor. As they ate in a tense, heavy silence, Nora's mind raced. Everything she thought she knew had been a lie. Her father, the hero, her uncle, the villain, and Elijah. What was he? A savior? An avenger? Or both? The food was tasteless in her mouth. She kept replaying her memories of her father, searching for any sign, any hint of the man Elijah described. There was nothing. Only kindness, love, and integrity. Could he have hidden such a dark secret from her for her entire life? After a few minutes of unbearable silence, Elijah put down his fork. "Look, Nora, I know this is a shock. When I came here, I thought Vernon Hayes was the only villain in this story. I thought your father was just another victim of his greed, learning that he might be the one who started it all." He shook his head, looking genuinely conflicted. "It changes things for me, too." "How?" she asked, her voice cold. "Because I see you," he said, his voice earnest. "I see your courage. I see your integrity. You're not your father. You're not your uncle. You're just you. And you're caught in the middle of a mess you didn't create." His words chipped away at the wall of ice she was building around her heart. She wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to believe that the man who had stood between her and certain death in that smokehouse was not her enemy. "So what do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow," he said, his expression hardening with resolve. "We meet with the judge. We tell him what we suspect. And then we get those ledgers, no matter what it takes. We find out the truth, once and for all. Are you with me?" She looked into his eyes, those piercing blue eyes that had seen her at her most vulnerable. She was terrified of him, and even more terrified of the truth he promised to uncover. But she was more terrified of living a lie. "Yes," she said, her voice finding its strength. "I'm with you." The die was cast. The next day, Judge Hollister was due to arrive, a tall, imposing man with a reputation for unwavering fairness. Nora found herself praying that his reputation was deserved. She dressed in a simple green calico dress Emma had laid out for her, the color a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside her. All day, she helped Emma with light chores, her hands busy but her mind miles away, rehearsing what she would say, trying to piece together the shattered image of her father. Elijah was gone for most of the day, having ridden out to his own ranch. He returned in the late afternoon, just as Nora's nerves were reaching a fever pitch. He had changed from his dusty work clothes into a clean shirt and vest. He looked more like a respectable businessman than a rugged cowboy, a transformation that was both jarring and strangely reassuring. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock echoed through the house. Emma went to answer it, returning moments later with a broad-shouldered, gray-haired gentleman and his kind-faced wife. "Judge and Mrs. Hollister, may I present Miss Nora Hayes?" "Miss Hayes," the judge said, his voice a deep baritone. His keen gray eyes seemed to look right through her. "I've heard much about your situation. Rest assured, we will get to the bottom of it." Dinner was a tense affair. They spoke of weather and local news, the monumental conversation that needed to happen hanging unspoken over the table. Finally, as dessert was served, Judge Hollister set down his fork. "Miss Hayes," he began, "Mr. Blackwood has shared with me not only your uncle's alleged crimes, but also his. Suspicions about the founding of the Silver Spur Mine." He looked at her, his expression serious but not unkind. "I would like to hear it all from you." Taking a deep breath, Nora recounted everything. Her uncle's violence, the ledgers, the B debt, and Elijah's shocking revelation about her father. She told the story without tears, her voice steady and clear, laying out the ugly, confusing facts as she knew them. When she finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. Judge Hollister stroked his neatly trimmed beard, his eyes thoughtful. "Your story," he said finally, "if true, paints a very complicated picture. Vernon Hayes is clearly a criminal, but James Hayes—" He looked at her with sympathy. It would seem he was a man with a heavy secret. "I need proof," Nora said, her voice tight. "I need to know for certain." "I agree," the judge said. "Those ledgers are paramount, not just for your uncle's case, but for settling this historical claim from the Blackwood family." Elijah, who had been quiet, spoke up. "Judge, with your permission, I'd like to ride out to the Hayes property tomorrow night. Get those ledgers myself." "Absolutely not," Nora interjected immediately. "It's too dangerous. My uncle is paranoid. He'll have men watching the place." "She's right," the judge said. "A direct approach is too risky. If Vernon suspects anything, he'll destroy the evidence for good." He paused, his sharp mind clearly working. "We need a distraction. Something to draw Vernon and his men away from the house, giving someone a window to get inside." "I can create a distraction," Elijah said, his jaw set. "A cattle stampede near the northern edge of his property. It'll cause enough chaos to pull every man he has out of the main house." "That's insane," Nora gasped. "You could be killed." "It's a risk I'm willing to take," Elijah said, his eyes locking with hers. "For justice, for my family, and for you." Judge Hollister considered the audacious plan. "It's bold," he mused, "but it might just work. But you can't go into the house, Elijah. You'll be busy with the cattle. We need someone else. Someone who knows the layout of the house. Someone Vernon would never suspect." Every eye in the room turned to Nora. The blood drained from her face. "Me?" she whispered. "No, it's impossible." "Think about it, Miss Hayes," the judge urged. "You know exactly where the ledgers are. You can get in and out before anyone even knows you were there. While Elijah has your uncle chasing phantom cattle rustlers, you will be securing the truth." The idea was terrifying. To go back to that house, the place of her imprisonment, the source of all her pain. But the thought of uncovering the truth, of finally knowing who her father really was a powerful lure. It was a terrifying, reckless, and utterly insane plan. And she knew, with a sinking feeling of certainty, that she was going to do it. The following night was starless, the sky covered by a thick blanket of oppressive clouds. A nervous energy crackled in the air, a perfect match for the storm brewing inside Nora. She was dressed in dark trousers and a shirt borrowed from one of Emma's smaller boarders, her hair tucked up under a boy's cap. She looked like a shadow, which was exactly the point. She and Elijah stood with their horses in a small, hidden copse of trees a mile from her uncle's property. The silence between them was thick with unspoken fears. "The plan is simple," Elijah said, his voice a low whisper as he went over it one last time. "I ride north. Start the stampede. You wait for the chaos. You'll hear the shouting, see the lanterns moving away from the house. That's your window. You have 20 minutes, Nora, no more. Get the ledgers and get out. I'll meet you back here." "Be careful, Elijah," she said, her voice trembling. The thought of him facing a herd of angry, stampeding cattle, and possibly her uncle's armed men, was terrifying. "I will," he promised. His hand came up, and for a moment, she thought he was going to touch her cheek. Instead, his fingers brushed briefly against her arm. The touch was electric. "You be careful, too." Before she could reply, he swung onto his horse and disappeared into the darkness like a phantom. Nora was left alone with the sound of her own frantic heartbeat. She waited. The minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. She strained her ears, listening for any sound. and then she heard it. A low rumble in the distance, growing steadily louder. It was followed by shouting, the frantic barking of dogs, and then the unmistakable sound of men on horseback, riding hard and fast away from the main house. It was working. This was her chance. With her heart in her throat, she urged her horse forward, keeping to the shadows of the trees that lined the property. She dismounted near the back of the house, tethering her horse in a place she knew wouldn't be seen. The house was dark, looming, and silent. It looked like a haunted tomb. She crept to the study window, the one her uncle always left unlocked. It slid open with a soft groan. Taking a deep breath, she pulled herself inside. The room smelled of her father. Old books, leather, and faint, sweet pipe smoke. The scent was a painful comfort. For a moment she was frozen by a wave of grief and nostalgia. Then she remembered Elijah's warning. 20 minutes. She moved quickly to the massive oak desk, her fingers finding the hidden latch on the side almost by instinct. A section of the wood paneling clicked open, revealing a small, hidden compartment. And inside, 3 leather-bound ledgers. She grabbed them, her hands trembling. She had the proof, but as she pulled them out, her fingers brushed against something else. Another book, smaller and older, tucked away in the very back of the compartment. It wasn't a ledger. It was a journal. Her father's private journal. Her 20 minutes were almost up. She should leave, now, but she couldn't. Her hands, seemingly with a will of their own, opened the journal. The first page was dated 20 years ago. Her father's familiar, elegant script filled the page. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, addressed to her mother, "I have done a terrible thing today, a thing I fear will haunt me for the rest of my days. Blackwood trusted me, and I have betrayed that trust. I told myself it was for you, for our future, for the baby you carry. I told myself I would make it right someday. But a lie is a lie, and a theft is a theft, no matter how you dress it up. The baby he mentioned." That was her. Nora's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, the ledgers and the journal clutched to her chest. It was true. All of it. Her father, her kind, wonderful father, had built their entire life on a foundation of deceit. He had ruined a good man, his partner, for the sake of his family, for her. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside the study. Nora froze, her blood turning to ice. Someone was in the house. The doorknob began to turn. The journal entry was a confession, a testament to 2 decades of guilt. Nora's world, which had been fracturing for days, finally shattered completely. Her father wasn't a monster, but he was no saint either. He was a flawed, desperate man who had made a terrible choice and had lived with the consequences every single day. The doorknob rattled again, more insistently this time. Nora scrambled backward on the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She slid behind the heavy velvet curtains just as the study door swung open. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, holding a flickering oil lamp. It was her uncle. "I knew it," Vernon snarled, his voice a low, venomous hiss. "I knew you'd come back, you little sneak. Looking for more evidence?" He hadn't seen her yet. He stalked into the room, the lamplight casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He went straight to the desk. "Where is it? Where did you put it?" he muttered, his hands patting down the surface. He was looking for the ledgers. But why was he here? The stampede. He should have been miles away. The plan had failed. Elijah. Was he safe? Vernon let out a roar of frustration and slammed his fist on the desk. "She's taken them!" He spun around, his eyes scanning the room, wild and paranoid. The lamplight fell on the open window. Not so clever after all. He started toward the window, and Nora knew she was trapped. He would find her in seconds. She had to do something. Anything. "Looking for these, Uncle?" she said, her voice shaking but clear. She stepped out from behind the curtains, holding the ledgers and the journal tightly to her chest. Vernon froze, his face a mask of shock, which quickly twisted into pure rage. "You," he spat. "You should have stayed away." "I couldn't," she said, finding a strange, cold calm settling over her. "Not when there were so many unanswered questions." "There are no questions," he bellowed, taking a menacing step toward her. "Your father built this mine. It's yours. I was just protecting it for you." "By stealing from it?" she shot back. "By beating me when I found you out?" "I was paying a debt," he yelled, his face purpling with fury. "A debt your sainted father incurred when he cheated his partner out of this very mine. The Blackwood debt." "I know," Nora said softly. "I know everything." She held up the journal. He wrote it all down. Vernon's face went slack, his rage momentarily replaced by a look of utter defeat. He stared at the journal in her hands as if it were a ghost. "He kept that?" he whispered. "All these years?" "He lived with the guilt every day," Nora said, her voice thick with emotion. "He wanted to make it right, but he didn't know how. He was trapped by his own lie." "I tried to fix it," Vernon said, his voice cracking. "After he died, I found the journal. I saw the entries in the ledger. I started sending the money to the Blackwood family, what I could skim from the profits. I was trying to honor him, to clean the slate, but the money, it was so much. It became tempting." His greed had overtaken his guilt. "It doesn't matter anymore," Nora said, her eyes boring into his. "The lies stopped tonight." A sudden, loud crash from the front of the house made them both jump. Shouts echoed through the hallways. "Vernon Hayes, this is Judge Hollister. You are under arrest." Vernon's eyes darted wildly from Nora to the door. He was trapped. He lunged, not at Nora, but at the fireplace, grabbing a heavy iron poker. "If I'm going down, all of this is going down with me!" he screamed, his eyes wild with desperation. He swung the poker at an oil lamp on a nearby table. The lamp shattered, and flames instantly leaped up the dry wooden paneling of the walls. The room was filling with thick black smoke. Vernon laughed, a horrifying, unhinged sound. "Let's see the Blackwoods get their justice from a pile of ash," he shrieked as the fire began to spread with terrifying speed. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. Nora backed away, her eyes stinging. The ledgers, the journal, the truth would be destroyed. Everything would be lost. Just then, the study door burst open. It wasn't the judge. It was Elijah. His face was smudged with soot, and there was a long, bloody gash on his forehead, but he was alive. His eyes found Nora through the smoke, and a look of fierce relief washed over his face. "Nora, are you all right?" "Elijah, the fire!" she coughed, pointing at her uncle, who now stood like a mad king in his burning castle. Elijah didn't hesitate. He charged past her, tackling Vernon to the ground just as a burning ceiling beam crashed down where he had been standing. Nora screamed. Through the smoke and flames, she saw Elijah struggling with her uncle, trying to drag him toward the door. "The books!" Elijah yelled at her over the roar of the fire. "Get the books and get out! Now!" She clutched the precious evidence to her chest and scrambled for the window. She couldn't leave him, but she knew he was right. The truth was more important. She threw the books out the window onto the soft grass below, then started to climb out herself. She looked back one last time. Elijah had subdued her uncle and was now dragging his unconscious form through the churning smoke toward the study door, which was now an archway of flame. The entire house was groaning, preparing to collapse. "Elijah!" she screamed. He looked up, his face grim but determined. "Go!" he yelled. "I'm right behind you!" She jumped from the window, landing hard on the ground, and ran, not stopping until she was a safe distance away. She turned just in time to see the roof of the study collapse in a shower of sparks and embers. She waited, her heart frozen in her chest, searching the chaos for any sign of him. Seconds felt like hours, and then A figure stumbled out of the main entrance of the house, coughing and covered in soot, dragging another man behind him. It was Elijah. He had made it out. He was alive. Nora ran to him, tears of relief streaming down her face, carving paths through the soot on her cheeks. He let go of Vernon's body, which the deputies immediately surrounded, and pulled her into his arms. He held her tight, his body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered into her hair, his voice rough with smoke and emotion. "I thought you'd lost me," she sobbed into his chest, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had gone completely mad. The house, her childhood home, the prison of her last few months burned behind them, a massive funeral pyre for all the lies and secrets it had held. She had the truth now, clutched in her hands. But the truth was ugly and painful, and had nearly cost them both their lives. She looked up at Elijah, at the gash on his forehead and the fierce, protective look in his eyes. She realized that her feelings for him were as complicated and as real as the terrible truth she had just uncovered. He wasn't just an avenger. He wasn't just a savior. He was the man who had risked his life, not just for his family's justice, but for her. And she knew, with a certainty that cut through all the chaos, that her life was now inextricably bound to his. The aftermath was a whirlwind of motion and emotion. Judge Hollister took charge with grim efficiency. Vernon Hayes, dazed and defeated, was taken into custody. The volunteer fire brigade arrived to battle the blaze, but it was too late. The old house was a lost cause, its secrets finally purged by flame. Nora, Elijah, and the judge sat in Emma's warm, quiet kitchen, the 3 ledgers and the precious journal laid out on the pine table between them. The smell of coffee and baked bread was a comforting anchor in a sea of chaos. Judge Hollister read through key passages of the journal, his expression growing more somber with each page. When he was finished, he closed the book gently. "This changes everything," he said, his voice heavy. "Your father, Miss Hayes, was a man tormented by his conscience. This journal is a clear admission of guilt. Legally, the Blackwood family has a claim to a significant portion of the Silver Spur mine." Nora nodded, her heart aching. It was the truth she had sought, and it was as painful as she had feared. She looked at Elijah. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. What would he do now? Would he press his claim? Take the mine that was, by rights, half his? Would he take his revenge on the daughter of the man who had wronged his family? "The mine is yours, Elijah," Nora said, her voice quiet but firm. "Or half of it, at least. I won't fight it. It's only right." Elijah was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her face. "No," he said finally, the word so soft she almost didn't hear it. The judge and Nora both stared at him in disbelief. "No," Judge Hollister repeated. "Mr. Blackwood, you have a solid legal claim here. An inheritance." "My father didn't want revenge," Elijah said, his eyes still locked on Nora's. "He wanted justice. And justice isn't about taking something back. It's about making things right. Nora isn't responsible for her father's sins." He finally turned to the judge. "I'll withdraw my family's claim," he stated, "on one condition." "And what is that?" the judge asked, clearly intrigued. "That Miss Hayes agrees to enter into a new partnership," Elijah said, turning back to Nora. "A 50-50 partnership between Hayes Mining and Blackwood Enterprises. We'll run the Silver Spur together. We'll build a new legacy, one based not on lies and guilt, but on honesty and hard work. We'll make it a business our fathers would have been proud of." The offer was staggering. It was an offer of peace, of forgiveness. It was a chance to build something new from the ashes of the past. Tears welled in Nora's eyes. This man, who had every right to hate her, to take everything from her, was instead offering her a future. "Why?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Why would you do that?" "Because," he said, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. My ma also taught me that you don't judge a person by the family they come from, but by the choices they make. And tonight, Nora Hayes, you made some very brave choices. He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. His touch was warm and steady, a promise of the future he was offering. In that moment, all the fear and betrayal she had felt melted away, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude and something more, something that felt terrifyingly like hope. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, I accept your partnership." A new chapter had begun. The trial of Vernon Hayes was swift. Faced with the irrefutable evidence of the ledgers, he confessed to everything and was sentenced to a long prison term. Nora visited him once before he was taken away. He was a broken man, and in his eyes she saw not a monster, but a man who had been consumed by a secret that was never his to keep. In the months that followed, Nora and Elijah became a formidable team. She had her father's head for business and a deep intuitive understanding of the mine. He had his family's practical mining knowledge and a reputation for integrity that earned them the respect of everyone in the territory. They worked side by side, rebuilding the Silver Spur, making it more profitable and safer than it had ever been. They established a fund for miners' families and built a new school for their children. Their business partnership slowly, naturally, blossomed into something more. There were long rides to the mine, heads bent together over geological maps. There were quiet evenings on Emma's porch, sharing dreams for the future. There were picnics by the creek where they had first rested during their frantic escape. Nora found herself falling in love with his quiet strength, his unwavering moral compass, and the way his blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. One warm summer evening, nearly a year after the fire, Elijah took Nora for a ride up to a ridge overlooking the valley. The view was breathtaking, the setting sun painting the mountains in strokes of gold and crimson. "I've been thinking," Elijah said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "These past months, working with you, getting to know you, they've been the best of my life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Nora's heart stopped. He opened it. Inside was a delicate ring, not with a diamond, but with a single perfect blue sapphire, the exact color of his eyes. "This was my mother's," he said softly. "I know our families have a complicated past, Nora, but I want us to have a future. I love you, Nora Hayes. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of pure joy streamed down Nora's face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Elijah, with all my heart." They were married in the fall, in the small church in Cedar Ridge. The whole town came to celebrate the union that had, quite literally, risen from the ashes. Nora, standing at the altar, looked at the handsome, steady man waiting for her, and she knew she was home. That night, standing on the porch of the new house they had built together on a piece of land overlooking both the town and the distant lights of the mine, Elijah wrapped his arms around her. "Happy, Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured into her hair. "Perfectly happy," she replied, leaning back against his solid chest. She thought back to that terrifying night in the smokehouse, when a mysterious stranger had appeared out of the darkness and changed her life forever. It was a story of lies, betrayal, and a fire that had destroyed everything. But it was also a story of truth, justice, and a love that was stronger than any secret. It was a story that proved that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the darkest of places. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more tales of the unexpected. You won't want to miss what's coming next.